irrigation, stoker hoses around the area.
Okay.
Again, it's only the middle section of the property, so about 5 or 6 rainbirds. In fact, the city water that runs off the hill will water probably that whole half side of it. So we're okay there.
Okay.
So it's not a problem, you've got.
I'm not too concerned about water.
Okay.
I'm more concerned about the chemical I put down last year to control the weeds.
Oh. Hopefully your corn will grow, huh?
Yeah, that's the big concern.
I think that this looks like it could be something that would be beneficial and fun for our community. I don't know how everyone else feels, but,
One quick question.
sure.
Just out of curiosity, I suppose, are you planning to sell the crops? Are you planning to harvest and sell these crops?
I'm planning on canning it myself.
And keeping it yourself, okay. I mean, there are just other rules about
Oh,
selling produce.
Yeah,
yeah, that was mentioned in the report there.
okay. Any others? Thank you.
Don't have anything else, any other questions, no? I guess we decided beforehand that public hearing wasn't going to be necessary, so if that's the case, I would entertain a motion.
Hang on just 1 second. Do you need a motion, like, I need to make a
No.
motion? Okay.
No. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we recommend approval of the conditional use permit for the corn maze located at 300 East, 2650 North for approval.
So-
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, Commissioner Dalhouse?
Yes.
Commissioner Kaiser?
Yes.
Commissioner Queenie?
Yes.
Commissioner Brown? Commissioner Cantanzaro?
Yes.
Yes. And Commissioner Ham?
Yes.
Motion passes. Hopefully you'll have some success with that. Good luck. That sounds like a fun thing.
My son wants to go.
I did ask Commissioner Cantanzaro if he'd give us a short report on the meeting that they had last night, or you can, either one.
He was there for more.
Okay.
I come late, we
This is the meeting with regard to the sign ordinance.
Actually, it turned out to be a meeting for much more than the sign ordinance. That the sign ordinance is part of what the committee is doing, but it's, the title of the committee is the Business Development Council. So they anticipate doing a whole lot more than just dealing with the signage. The way it was started and discussed, there was a whole discussion about which way does this community plan to see itself going in the future for future development of commercial business in town to generate a commercial tax base. And some of that was discussed, and it was kind of decided those were long-term goals and that we needed to pick the closest fruit to the tree here that we could deal with immediately. And there were 4 topics with regards to signage that were discussed. And what ultimately came out of the meeting was that there were assignments given on each one of the 4 topics to prepare for a presentation at our next meeting to be able to discuss those 4 issues. The 4 issues were exterior signs that are non-specific, that can only be up for 4 days, and they had some issue with only allowing them up for 4 days. They had some issues with vehicular signage, about the fact that if the car remains parked for more than 24 hours, it's in violation of vehicular signage, and henceforth people like U-Haul and people with small businesses can be in violation just by having their sign on their car and leaving it parked. And so they wanted to discuss that. They wanted to discuss display of sales materials outside. The ordinance, our ordinance states specifically that all materials should be inside a building. And there are a number of businesses in the area that are in violation of that, starting with Smith's, and working its way down to the auto tire store. And then there was problems with small signs that were generated within the right-of-way that seemed to hover around and never seemed to go anywhere. Things like Remax sale signs and stuff like that that they wanted to deal with. So those were kind of 4 different topics that they wanted to talk about. We also talked about and left the meeting with an assignment for Mr. Walker to bring in his proposal for what he'd like to see for the theater signage. And those are all items that are going to be discussed at our next meeting on May 4th at 5:30.
Okay, anything that you'd like to add there?
No.
That's-
Miles an hour, 50 miles an hour up and down Washington, where you're going 30, 35 on a secondary road. So there is some discussion on, there might need to be some looking at breaking down a signage and where it's located.
But it's a last resort type of action, but.
There was also some discussion that was had regarding whether or not this community wanted to be a tree-lined streets or whether it needed to be.
Well, and that's interesting, because that leads me to the other thought that was brought up, and we have funded so far in the proposed budget an update of our general plan. Because right now, the general plan says that we have decided along Washington Boulevard that we will attempt to be a tree-lined boulevard of sorts, not unlike Brigham City with the large trees that they have. Of course, we have different species than what they have, but the look would be somewhat similar, and that's one of the reasons they went to the lower.
Because we didn't want them to become an eyesore where they plaster the whole side of the car, you know, back then it wasn't a vinyl sign, it would just be a sheet of paper with the name of the store painted on it or something, you know, it was not attractive at all. And so that's why we really limited that as tight as we did. I don't think any of us would have been opposed to having a car out front with the name of the business on it. We don't want that to become a permanent deal that is allowing, say, the business owner to circumvent the sign ordinance to come around to actually get more signage than the rest of his neighbors. And that's why we kind of.
But the question there, and the one that's raised, is what happens to people like Penske and U-Haul that have got all their trucks plastered with their signage, and by our ordinance, we don't allow those people in the city unless they move their car every 24 hours or move their truck, and
See, and that's something that you don't, it's hard to think of every possibility that might come across. And I don't know where you're coming from there, but it might be to say, well, you park your trucks behind the front of the building so that they're not an eyesore out there, kind of a deal.
This is the beauty of the committee that we have, is that we're getting input from so many different angles.
yeah,
And yeah, we're not gonna cover everything, but I think we're gonna come really close.
yeah.
Now, you see Bullfrog Spas, and has he got a Jeep that's all,
He's got a Jeep and
Yeah, he's got a Jeep that I happen to think it's beautiful.
I don't mind that, but then I see his spas all stacked up on the corner, and that's not real attractive.
How about the dog sitting in the spa in front of it? That's not real attractive either.
No, I mean, but it could be worse than when you have them stacked, 4 and 5 high, that was,
Well, that's his storage yard. That's not.
that's,
Yeah,
we're not into that, we
goes
wanna
under
keep
the
things
outdoor just-
But
clean and neat and.
okay, so we say we don't like the spas on that corner, but what about the tires down at Big O
They
Tires?
go in every night, tell Sean to haul
They're
his
allowed
closet
to do
every
that
night.
now. He didn't tell you that, but they're allowed to do what they're doing. If you have a product and you take it out, display it, take it in, you can do that.
That's right. So tell the
He's
spas
allowed
they
to
go
do
in
that now,
every
he didn't
night.
tell you that. He meant want you to think that Big O Tire was not in conformance, they are.
He's been told by other people that he's not. He may not have been told that by you.
He hasn't been told that by the city.
No, I know, but there are
Oh,
other
yeah,
people telling him that that's the
there's
way.
self-righteous people that are going around trying
It's
to.
not just him, is what it is.
I know, yeah.
See, and we'd also discuss like 7-Eleven's got their firewood or